Here we are. Sunless Skies. We gonna play the real mode. The Sunless Seas mode. What is up? You have returned to the Reach, an untamed, sunless span of the heavens, London's new frontier, a celestial garden run wild. Your journey back from the Blue Kingdom was tumultuous. Your locomotive is crippled, and Captain Whitlock badly wounded. As first officer, the crew look to you. The nearest station is New Winchester. Can you get the Orpheum there safely? Much to the relief of your stokers, you find a barrel of fuel among the detritus. A wreck drifts here, less fortunate even than you. We should scavenge her for repairs, a crewman suggests. The wreck hangs in the sky, pocketed with recent gunfire. You and the boarding party don your sky suits, garments of waxed canvas lined with felt to protect against the cold of the sky. Two of the crew are whispering as they dress. What business did Captain Whitlock have in the Blue Kingdom anyway? Why the devil did we trespass on the districts of the dead? You silence him. Now's not the time. The gap between the two engines isn't wide, but the endless fathoms of heaven gape beneath it. You jump. Your stomach lurches with vertigo as the stars blaze above you and below. The air of the heavens is thin and torn by unpredictable winds. Then your boots hit the running board of the Ozymandias, and your leather-gloved hands fumble for a hold. One of your companions throws you a line, and you lash the two engines together. Only then do the rest of the boarding party follow you. One of them forces open an exterior hatch, and you clamber inside. Her interior is cold, unlit, and whistles with wind. Your party's lamps spread buttery light over the narrow, panelled passages. You make your way towards the hold, stepping over bodies crumpled in the corridor. Unfortunately, your way is blocked. A bulkhead has been mangled inward by a well-aimed barrage. The rest of the boarding party follow you without enthusiasm. You recall the first time you climbed outside an engine, helping the captain fix a leak in an exterior pipe. The wind had shrieked, buffeting you. You asked the captain what would happen if you slipped. "You fall," she answered tersely. "But where to?" you asked. She looked down, then up, then back. The sky's depths spiraled all about you. "Away," she said, and you heard her fear. Back in the present, you tumble back into the Ozymandias through a shattered window. Your party spill in after you, glad to be back inside. You have reached the Ozymandias' hold, a ruin of smashed cargo and spilled supplies. Hopefully somewhere amid the detritus you can find parts to repair the Orpheon and restock your stores. Your companions work quickly. The Ozymandias' hull has begun to creak. Your actions on board may have compromised its integrity. You find enough food and gear to restock your supplies, and enough spare parts to make the necessary repairs to the Orpheon. The food will need to be thoroughly thawed, of course, but you've eaten worse in the skies. "Aho!" cries one of your party, prying the lid off a long crate. It holds a cannon, still nestled in straw. Another crewman pulls a battered bird cage from a pile of ruined cargo. Within the cage, something winged and furred opens a sullen eye. You examine your finds. The Ozymandias emits a long, juddering creak. Your boarding party exchange nervous glances. From the chaos of its hold, you have retrieved repairs and supplies, and discovered some useful equipment, a gun that could be mounted on your locomotive, and an educated bat. The Cotterell and Hathersage Jerusalem fires single shells at good range more or less accurately. You order 2 of your party to get it back to your vessel and fit it immediately. The Ozymandias groans again. The structure shudders spasmodically. The bat treats its rescue as an inconvenience and immediately begins haggling over pay. You offer to put it back in its damn cage and leave it on the Ozymandias, at which point it becomes more polite. You doubt it will last. The wreck of the Ozymandias screeches as its metal buckles and tears. You press on through the shuddering corridors, searching frantically for the engine room. The engine room is grey with spilled ash and littered with corpses. Little has survived the Ozymandias' ruin. You search fruitlessly for coal, but linger too long. As the wreck is racked with final, violent tremors, you race back to the Orpheon. With a dying groan, the Ozymandias splits in two, sending shards of splintered plating spinning into the sky. Several of them bite into the Orpheon, mauling its hull. Stoking your engines, you steam away from the collapsing wreck. You are restocked at least, and rearmed. Some say that the clockwork sun was brighter once, but they say it quietly and lie about it afterwards. The walls of the captain's cabin are lined with a hodgepodge of curios from across the sky. Captain Whitlock lies in bed. Black marks cover her skin like a monstrous brand. When she coughs, coils of acrid smoke pour from her lungs. The locomotive's doctor attends her. His lips are tight. A word of living fire pursued the Orphean across the Blue Kingdom. It caught you just before you passed through the transit relay to the Reach, and set its brand upon the captain. It's burned itself right through her, the doctor whispers. When I closed the worst of her wounds, I could see the sign is seared into her bones and her organs. Judging from her symptoms, it's on the inside of her lungs, too. The captain leans to one side and vomits a plume of fire into a copper bowl. There is nothing the doctor can do. The captain opens her eyes as you draw near. She attempts to smile. Her mouth is blistered from the blue fires that dance on her tongue. Her hand grips your arm. Her skin is hot as a kettle. Made arrangements. The Orphean will be yours. Her voice is just a rasp of burned meat breath. But promise! She breaks off to scream a word in a language that was not made for human mouths. When she resumes speaking English, she is weaker, her request little more than a gasp. Promise me one last service. Promise! She laughs, a sound like wood snapping on the fire. Ash sprays from her mouth. It was worth it, she swears. Her voice is suddenly firm, her eyes hard and bright. Then she sinks back into the scorched pillows and a twisting, frantic fever. You leave the cabin and the scorched stink of its air behind, and return to the bridge. New Winchester is further than you'd like, and the captain hasn't long left. You approach the buckled wreckage, poised to plunder the plunderers. Behind you, someone is humming a song of victory. The bridge is in ruins, the hold is crumpled, but its main gun has survived. An engineering crew could remove it intact. Your crew return in one piece, and bearing the spoils of your victory. It was a right devil to remove, Captain, says the lead engineer. Hope you make good use of it. The Marauder cannon launches chunks of jagged, superheated rock via a brutally basic mechanism. Simple, ruthless, effective. The taste of smog, the sound of iron on iron. We are home. You coast into the bustle, the din, the soot and the steam of Wolseley Station. It is clogged with other engines, scrappy mining locomotives from Lustrum Way, weathered explorers gleaming with frost, sleek company vessels with bright brass fittings. No sooner have you pulled into the sidings than a brusque station master bustles over. He requests to come aboard. I must speak with your captain, he insists, brandishing a ledger. The usual formalities. The Orphean's doctor has just appeared at your shoulder. His face is solemn. His hat is in his hands. He lowers his eyes. The crew exchange a bleak, wordless looks. The Orphean itself feels suddenly more empty. The station master looks confused. You inform him that, unfortunately, Captain Whitlock has just passed. Ah, he says neutrally, sorry to hear that. Very sad, very sad. He waits for what he considers an appropriate minute and a half before continuing. Alas, even amidst tragedy, the cogs of bureaucracy must turn. If Captain Whitlock is deceased, the station authority require their answers from the first officer. He dons a set of spectacles and locates his pen. It will be relatively painless. Name, background, purpose of visit, etc. Shall we begin? Today, London lies between the stars. Her new empire unfolds across the heavens. But 10 years ago, before the Northern Gate was opened, before the renewed Empress led her people into the skies, it lay in a vast cavern far beneath the earth. Deep, dark, marvelous. Who were you then? You roved the mournful, merciless waters of the Untersee. You were a Z captain. You remember bats winging across the still black sea, the distant lights of London calling you home, salty prayers offered to heedless gods. It was a hard life, and often a short one, but you made your mark. Her Majesty's Navy had a great many opinions on what should and shouldn't be sold in her territories. Your own opinions were rather different. You want comfortable retirement, and by comfortable you mean extravagant. Many have made their fortunes out among the stars. Many more have failed, broken, lost in the drifting light. Will you be different? 3 weeks have passed. This morning, Captain Whitlock received a simple memorial service. Her body was consigned to a necropolis train bound for the serene mausoleum. Now you sit, with a handful of her relatives, in the threadbare offices of her solicitors. A methodical notary is reading the will. The captain was wealthy once, but squandered her capital on mysterious expenses before her expedition to the Blue Kingdom. The captain's relatives, from whom she was mostly estranged, are clearly wondering why you are here. In a final codicil, the notary announces, Captain Whitlock confirmed that possession of the Orpheon was to pass to its first officer. He peers at you with dry, grey eyes. This includes a certain black box contained in the Orpheon's hold. Captain Whitlock's final request was that, at the time of your choosing, you transport said box to an address in London. He hands you an address card. And deposit it there. You are not to look inside. She gave no explanation. And that's it. You're captain now. The Orpheon is yours. The clamouring central station of New Winchester, a place of steam and smut and thundering iron. Here you can find people willing to pay for a skilled captain's service. The engineers at the Wolvesey Yards claim they can repair anything. Whether the damage was caused by an unfortunate collision, a point-blank salvo, or the charge of a crotchety cantankereye, they'll fix it. The mechanics take pride in their work. Your newly returned engine is not just fully repaired, it gleams. I specialize in test driving, but I'm looking for something quieter. The driver indicates a crashed engine, still smoking. Like that, without the screaming. The driver boards, eager to get started. I recently parted ways with the Windward Company, they explain. Personally, I think a crash a week isn't so bad. They disagree. Oh well, live and learn. The smoggy, clanking, singing, stamping, thronging, frantic heart of the Reach. An ever-expanding port of soot-smudged glass and bright steel, spilling across a drifted, mist-wrapped archipelago. Its factories thunder. Its engine sheds ring with hammers and hiss with steam. Locomotives chug into sidings for repair, or flare across the sky and away into the high wilderness. The slow-burning war for the Reach forms the backdrop to daily life in New Winchester. Citizens wishing to keep up with developments in the war turn to the New Gazette. It is, famously, the only newspaper worth reading in New Winchester, as well as the only paper that hasn't bankrupted itself. Its quality speaks for itself. The Assembly runs New Winchester from the Victory Hall, and seeks to strengthen its hand in the Reach. London's proxy, the Windward Company, however, maintain a considerable presence in the Reach. Although New Winchester is still neutral ground, tensions are mounting within and without the port. Your name does not appear in any of the tacti-focused reporting of the war. Apparently you're not considered worthy of comment. a club where seasoned captains gather to trade stories and share advice with younger skyfarers. Old pistons gleam on the walls. The shelves are crowded with mementos from across the sky. The clientele raise their voices to be heard above the comforting clamour of the adjacent engine yards. Four are gathered at their usual table. The masked citizen, a libertine, polymath, and pioneer of the neo-nocturnal artistic school. The bedeviled didact, a scholar haunted by his discoveries. The plucky baroness, explorer, collector, philatelist. And Spatchcocker Meg, who hunts monsters. Of course, everything out here is jolly dangerous, says the Baroness. Few risk the skies, so news of distant ports is valuable. Collect port reports from the places you visit, and deliver them to Victory Hall or Company House. The more you turn in at once, the more they'll pay. Look for other opportunities on the way, advises the masked citizen. Passengers who want transport, rich men in need of bloody work, etc. Between them, they've carried Navarantine gemstones from Eleutheria, souls to the Blue Kingdom, and raw hours to London. Have they tips? Ah, the didact says, fiddling with his innumerable talismans. An essential topic. Meg slides you a stool, and the captains shuffle around to make room. The masked citizen buys you a drink of their own invention. It is violet and foggy. The plucky baroness gives you a brisk, encouraging grin. Ask away. You can sell practically anything at a big trade hub like New Winchester, the Baroness answers. If you want to buy, though, you'll need to travel to more distant ports. Each specializes in a particular export. Meg spits chewing tobacco onto the floor. No money in buying market prices and selling at them too. You want to look for bargains, or prospects of people offering better money. Buy cheap, sell dear. The masked citizen sips their drink. The biggest port in each region has a bazaar where captains do business. There, you'll learn of people at other ports prepared to pay over the odds for a commodity. When you accept the commission for a prospect, it's yours. No other captain will pursue it. It's all fantastically civilized. Their smile is droll. You'll have to source the goods yourself, of course, says the bedeviled didact. Find a port that exports them. The client will want a certain amount. You can supply some or all of it. But if you provide all they need, they may furnish you with an additional reward. Spatchcocker Meg wipes beer foam from her lips. Nowhere this busy, deals are snapped up too fast here. Visit the bazaars at quieter ports. Can find all sorts. Limited supply, mind. A bargain won't hang about forever, though, the Baroness confides, steadfastly ignoring Meg's manners. So don't hang about. If you've space in your hold, snap them up. You can always sell them at a major port for an adequate return. Is there perhaps a way that a more resourceful captain could prejudice circumstances in their favour? Meg laughs, a noise like a sneeze crossed with a ricochet. It ain't who you is, it's who you know, innit? Nepotism. She taps her broken nose. Quite, the masked citizen remarks. The wider your circles, the more advantageous the opportunities that will present themselves. A wise captain makes the most of them. An opportunity. The host at Magdalen's needs an urgent delivery of seeds, paying a pretty penny too. If I were you, I'd get to the bazaar straight away, put my mark against it. Meg grunts. Broker in Port Avon is selling cheap seeds. Chirpy chap, God knows why. His face looks like it. Yeah. His face looks like it's been pushed through a mangle. An opportunity. Port Avon lies to the east of New Winchester. and Magdalen's lies to the west of New Winchester. The New Winchester Bazaar. Locomotive captains gather at the bazaar to trade goods and information. Here you can acquire prospects, opportunities to sell goods at a distant port for an excellent price. Accept a prospect to claim it, source the goods, and deliver them. Magdalen's provides comfort and sympathy to the weary skyfarer. Its hosts will tell you any lie you need to hear. Some of those lies require flowers. The amenable host wants up to 3 sacks of verdant seeds and will pay 80 sovereigns for each. Magdalen's lies to the west of New Winchester. The fire-eyed maid of smoky war, all hot and bleeding will we offer them. A rickety weapon that indiscriminately lobs smoking balls of superheated debris. The fastidious inspector. "Excuse me, Captain." A woman pushes through the crowds towards you. She is short and square-shouldered, in a neat black suit and polished shoes. She shows you the case of her pocket watch. It is embossed with the crown and hourglass of London's horological office, the body responsible for ensuring time is consistent across the empire. "I'm hoping to book passage to Port Prosper," she says, slipping the watch away. "I can, of course, pay." Pay sounds promising. "Thank you. The locomotive I was on broke down following a boiler rupture. The chief engineer's fault, I suspect. A gentleman fonder of brandy than of diligence. Here, an initial sum to seal our bargain." Prosper lies to the northwest of New Winchester. Not that there is such a thing as north, south, east, or indeed west out here. Instead, London cartographers picked 4 of the brighter, more reliable stars visible from the Empress's new palace and named them north, east, south, and west. Londoners value familiarity. The incautious driver. The driver has no tolerance for uneventful voyages. When not on duty, they stare through the stained glass windows as if willing excitement to ride in on a wave of disaster. When they take the wheel, the rest of the crew grip the nearest available supports and whisper quiet prayers to various gods. Today, the sky is as cool and blue as ice in a glass. A new port. The crew are relieved to see land, perhaps unwisely. Port Avon. Behold, a ruin of giants, gargantuan blocks jigsaw together, furred with moss and whispering with orchards. A bucolic village nestles amongst them. Smoke coils daintily from the chimneys. A leisurely game of cricket unfolds on the village green. A ramshackle dock juts out into the sky beside a farmyard scattered with rusty locomotive parts. Plating, piping, a chugging motor with its innards exposed. An oily-faced, black-haired girl waves your locomotive into position. "Welcome to Port Avon," she calls as you disembark. A rich knot of scents greets you. Leaves and wood smoke, enriched by an infrequent but pungent intrusion of goat. Port Avon welcomes new visitors, but your novelty will wear off the more time you spend there. When you visit it in future, you may need to bring something to keep them friendly. Port Avon spills prettily across sections of colossal drifting ruins. Its orchards bask in the evening gold light of a distant nebula. The flora of the reach is dangerously fecund. Plant a seed, water it, give it a little light, and it'll sprout overnight. During transport, it is vital the sacks be stored in a cool, dark, dry place, or your hold is likely to become an impromptu shrubbery. The locals are willing to update you on the news. There's not much to share. Were it not for talk of smugglers and sky beasts, you could easily confuse this place for a village on the world you left behind. It's quite peaceful here. Apart from some fuss over a newspaper delivery. The villagers frown and change the subject when you ask about it. The Nowhere Inn. Botheridge's A Tour of Heaven describes Port Avon's single public house as a welcome respite, justly famed for its authentic old earth cider. The locals can be welcoming for a while. A golden nebula scintillates above Port Avon's apple trees, allotments, eel fishers, and steepled church. Here you may, if you choose, immerse yourself in the village's quaint rhythms. The heart of the village, surrounded by orchards of real apple trees that were shipped through the avid horizon as seeds. An endowment of years from her renewed majesty grew them to swift maturity. The crack of willow on leather, a hesitant smattering of applause. The game could charitably be described as stately, but there is a moment of excitement when the batsman hits a six and the ball whizzes over thatched roofs off the edge of the port and is lost forever in the starry deeps. The audience groans. Play stops when someone goes to get another ball. What palace was this? What giant king made his home here? And why did he abandon the vast stores of souls that the locals still quarry from beneath the stones? Perhaps you might risk a furtive excavation of your own. Not one of the looming stones is quite square, yet they all fit together immaculately. What were these ruins before their fall? Even their bones are tall and stately as the finest cathedrals of old France. What purpose did they serve in the past, plentiful days when their sun still shone? The clamour of New Winchester can be heard on the wind, familiar as a disagreeable uncle. The fastidious inspector approaches you in the galley. "Captain, good day. I noticed your ship's clock has stopped. Perhaps you'd permit me to repair it." She has a little case of tools and a hopeful expression. She gives a graceful flicker of a smile and sets to work. Soon she has the back off the clock and has spread its tiny cogs across the galley table. Obscure horological tools gleam brassily among them. Everything has a place. I appreciate the opportunity to keep myself busy. Staring too long at the stars is harmful to the temperament. What are the duties of an agent of the horological office? She sniffs. It is of fundamental importance that 10 o'clock on the 2nd of June in one corner of the Empire occurs at the same time as 10 o'clock on the 2nd of June in the opposite corner. How is an empire fit to function if it can't agree what day it is? Unfortunately, the process is complicated by the fact that time is less reliable than it was. The hours trade has seen to that. The seat of the Empire lies in far-off Albion, where a man-made sun burns in the sky. Another sun blazed there once, before her renewed majesty conquered it. London sits in her coat of smog. Courtiers squabble at the foot of the throne of hours, hoping to receive endowments of years. Meanwhile, hard-working civil servants labour to ensure everything runs as it should. Was there a touch of archness there? All is normal. I miss her, though. There is no city like London in all the skies, and Albion is very different from the Reach. Much more civilized. The wide, wild frontier. A sunless domain, but impossibly verdant, with gargantuan vines, cathedral-sized bronze woods, and livid fungal archipelagos. It has an uncouth splendour, but I miss Albion and the steady light of the clockwork sun. These sunless reaches are too misty and quiet. She pauses. But critical. The territories here are rich with raw hours, and enough vegetation grows on them to feed the whole of London, even if some of it is a dubious shape. You've heard the Empress awards her favourites with gifts of years to extend their lives, and that you can become rich mining for hours to satisfy London's hunger for them. Oh, hours have more uses than that. We use them to increase the efficiency of work worlds, to speed journeys to distant regions, to resolve overcrowding in prisons. It does make my life more difficult when time knots and stretches like a wool on the loom. More difficult, but more vital. Her Majesty seized a great trove of them when she assumed the throne of hours, and now even more have been found in the Reach. Miners dig them out from the ground. She looks momentarily wistful. I hope someday to retire with a modest pension of years myself, to prolong the better part of my retirement. The Reach is torn apart by discontent between London loyalists and the more independent settlers. There are those who feel that London is a long way away and that they do a better job of governing themselves. The frontier attracts independent spirits. We call them tacketies for the hobnail boots that are so practical out here. London, unsurprisingly, disagrees. The Windward Company earnestly represents Her Majesty's interests in the region, sometimes very earnestly indeed. The tacketies call London's loyalists stovepipes for our hats, I supposed. She avoids looking at you. And you, Captain, where do your sympathies lie? Perhaps you'd rather be left alone. Perhaps you're undecided. Perhaps you see the conflict as an opportunity. What a remarkable indulgence, she remarks, with a raised eyebrow. Her hands are deft and sure. She polishes, she cleans, she reassembles. Thank you, she says, a small, embarrassed silence. It's possible the inspector is pleased. It's rather hard to tell. And to you, Captain. I think I shall make a cup of tea. Wispy condensation trails across the sky, the ghosts of passing trains. Company House, the local headquarters of the Windward Company, London's proxy in the Reach. Deliver port reports here to receive rewards and win the company's favour. Following the uprising, the fortunes of the Windward Company fell in New Winchester. Now their modest offices occupy an ex-tinning factory in the murkier recesses of town. It continues to smell, faintly, of beans. The office's general manager lives in perpetual fear of his secretary, who was appointed directly from the London office. Their references were inarguable. Whoops, I didn't even... Whatever. The foyer bristles with stovepipe hats. The prudent secretary pushes between them, narrow and unsmiling, with a blousy shirt and black trousers. The secretary's gender is the subject of some debate in the company canteen. The secretary's prudence, however, is not. Both these facts provide the secretary with a great degree of satisfaction. I would be interested to receive reports on other events in other ports. However small, the company has expansive interests. One never knows what might be important. Victory Hall. The Assembly, a coalition of independent-minded settlers colloquially called tacketies, gather and argue here. Deliver port reports here to receive rewards and win the tacketies' favour. Raised in the wake of the blockade of New Winchester, this magnificence of glass and steel houses the Colonial Assembly. The indurate veteran insists on taking a moment in the atrium, watching the stars burn coldly in the mists. Her skin is brown and her hair is beginning to grey. She wears a heavy, unbuttoned coat. Medals gleam in the shadows behind its lapels. One half of her face is scarred from frostbite. She is enjoying a quiet cigarillo while her peers argue in the chamber of assembly. You talk for a while about life in the skies. When her cigarillo is just a stub, she says, "I'll be grateful to hear reports of your travels, Captain. I suspect all manner of strife and imprudence is going to kick off in the foreseeable. I mean to be ready for it." There is a bullet scar beside your heart. You have learned, since, to be more judicious in your choice of friends. The wreck gleams with frost. Its windows are dark, its engine silent. Perhaps something of value lies within. Frost has locked them, but a pry bar makes an effective key. Your crew attach cables to the wreck to hold it steady as they pry apart the doors. A sudden gust of wind rocks both vessels, and the young man straining at the pry bar slips. He cries out, his hand mangled on a torn edge of metal. He's likely to lose his fingers. The treasure you retrieve from the hold will be little comfort to him. Something precious has been concealed. The box is entirely empty of all precious trinkets. What? What it does contain, however, is a stuffed and preserved corpse, which slides neatly out of a concealed compartment. Once the screaming has stopped, it is determined that it might attract a certain sort of buyer. You approach the buckled wreckage, poised to plunder the plunderers. Behind you, someone is humming a song of victory. Okay, I'm not gonna... The crew of the Marauder lie dead in the corridor, killed not by your guns, but by knives and small arms fire. The only survivor is the captain, locked in the brig with a bottle of brandy. Chalk eyes stare back from every wall. When he ran out of chalk, he began scraping them in with his fingernails. Little remains of them but bloodied stumps. "Seen this before, Captain," says a crew member, grasping your arm. "Sky madness. Magdalens can treat it if you can be bothered to take the poor sod. The high wilderness is cruel. This could easily be you one day." The crew wrap the sky-maddened captain in blankets, then secure them tightly with belts. It takes 4 to transport him safely to your locomotive. He might not be happy restrained, but it should keep him from harm until you get to Magdalens. The captain secured, you have a moment to see whether there's anything of worth on his locomotive before abandoning it to the wilderness. A distressingly odoured barrel. No one is keen to get close. You pry the lid off. Dear God, what the blazes? Your navigator pokes the thing inside with a big stick, till assured that it's dead. Your crew go to work eagerly, vaulting out into the bright, tools at the ready. The stripping of the Marauder is slow and painful work. They're cobbled together of stolen parts. Finding suitable fits for your own engine is a process of trial and error. Many of your crew will have lost friends, family, lovers to the Marauders. It speeds the work. Magdalens, a place of peace, contemplation, and rest. The driver twitches miserably. The House of Small Comfort. Magdalens is the closest thing many skyfarers have to a home. It offers services to alleviate the strain of a life spent close to the stars. The glass spires of Magdalens pierce the cloud like swords. Shadowed figures can be seen moving through the gleaming corridors, their identities obscured by the hued glass. Crowds of skyfarers, ministry officials and merchants mill about the forecourt in varying degrees of distress. All watch the clock set in the clock tower, waiting for their appointed hour. The nurses bring a stretcher to carry the sky-maddened captain from your train. He'll receive the care of Magdalen's finest. At least, Magdalen's finest with a sense of charity, given that he has nothing on him to pay for their ministrations. The amenable host smiles. Just what we needed. Although I must admit I do miss roses, and lilies, and bluebells. Still, these celestial blooms have their own virtues. Some of them weep, you know. He pays you a generous gratuity. An attendant escorts you through the dazzling violet corridors. The host's red door is always open. The attendant leaves you just as the clock begins to chime. The amenable host reclines on a couch of crushed velvet, a goblet of sparkling wine in his long fingers. Somewhere in the tower above him, the great clock ticks away. As a policy, the host's atrium is always open to guests. He is available to hear opinions, friendly criticism, and suggestions. Today, he has a headache. He beckons you close. His voice is soft and sibilant, like butter melting in candlelight. A guest who has become rather too attached to a particular attendant. He always requests that the same attendant appears in the exact same guise. The amenable host's lip curls in distaste. He reiterates the aim of Magdalen's, a place of healing and respite. It was not meant to feed obsession or self-indulgent self-loathing. This guest brings sickness. I would have him purged. I have a dossier on our guest, if you're interested in helping. The amenable host smiles indulgently. I'm so glad you want to help. He produces a thin sliver of pages and passes them to you. I'd recommend taking on the role of one of our attendants. That way you'd be playing the role of someone significant to him. The amenable host sighs, reaching for his goblet. He knows all of our attendants by voice now. Someone new is needed. He stands on the threshold of the treatment chambers, his hands trembling. The attendants on duty have been briefed as to your involvement. How do you plan to deal with him? A treatment chamber has been emptied for you, should you wish to adopt a guise from his past. Alternatively, he is stood right there. He does not seem to have noticed you, his eyes instead boring through the doors of the treatment rooms. Disguises have caused the poor sod enough trouble. The lachrymose guest's eyes widen as you approach. Has there been a problem? You invite him to sit. Stiff brandies are ordered. You recount your own share of heartbreaks and tragedies, how you found yourself here, and you make clear that despite all that, you will be leaving. He nods slowly, and after a quick shake of your hand, walks away towards the station. He does not look back. The amenable host smiles beatifically. Beatifically? Of course, my staff will be pleased. It is a risk of our trade when our clients can no longer separate identity and illusion, but seldom pleasant. He sighs deeply, echoing around the chamber like a newly freed dove. It is a trap any of us could fall into. His face darkens briefly. Here, take this. He fishes around beneath his couch for one of his goblets. It'll fetch a pretty price. Take it with my thanks, and do visit us again. An attendant in the foyer schedules appointments with the aid of a hefty daybook and a very accurate clock. They are eager to explain the procedures and the rules that govern here. This is a hospital for the spirit. Our staff will become the person you need. Here you may say farewell to a doomed comrade, resurrect an old love, spar with a defeated enemy, all for a fair price. But do not overindulge. Our services are to heal, not to become an addiction. An elderly grande dame is haranguing an attendant. Yes, but where is my husband? That gentleman was most assuredly not he. Hushed murmuring follows, interrupted by a loud cry. No, I did not misunderstand the rules. He's joined your staff. Magdalene's is abuzz with activity. Barely has the clock chimed when a clamour grows up from the front desk, guests rushing to and fro from appointments. Lord Blank was seen in conversation with the amenable host. The east wing was closed for general access all day. A certain distinguished admiral was seen with his second-in-command entering one of the chambers of regret. Several guests succumbed to an excess of sentimentality and were forcibly removed. Despite the proximity to New Winchester, marauders prowl these glades to demonstrate their defiance. The detritus of yet another skirmish in the Winchester War. Engineers don sky suits and retrieve the salvageable plating, using it to patch the worst of your locomotive's damage. The inscription on the memorial to the unknown rat is dedicated to those brave Ratus Faber who gave their lives in the early exodus to heaven. Snow whips your locomotive. Your stokers work double shifts at the boilers. The engine's headlights glow like a ghost upon the icy mists. Your guns have reduced the door to a smouldering keep, but sovereigns are surprisingly durable. The marauders haunt the reach like bats in an attic. They spend their ill-gotten gains at the more licentious ports, acquiring sins in the riot of Lustrum before weeping their confessionals at Magdalen's, but a few meagre funds remain. It is dark and peaceful here. The stars are few. A Cantankerite placated. The Cantankerite are lumbering, half-fossilized isopods that will attack anything they disapprove of. Given that they are very ancient and murderously grumpy, that means almost everything. The defeated Cantankerite has been blasted to smithereens. Only a cloud of stony chunks remain. A sudden wind drives the jagged Cantankerite fragments against your hull. They crack against your windows, drum on your plating. Gritty particulates clog your pistons. When you dig the shards free, you find some of them gleam with veins of semi-precious stones. You returned from a voyage to find your home occupied by strangers. You knew their names and their faces, but the place they once held in your heart had been filled by the sea. It is good to love many things, for therein lies the true strength, and whosoever loves much performs much, and can accomplish much, and what is done in love is well done. Carillion Centre. This peaceful Carmine institution was founded by devils from London and dedicated to the betterment of the soul. Botheridge's A Tour of Heaven describes it as a cross between a spa, a sanatorium, and purgatory. She commends its bracing airs. A hawker sells the latest London pot boilers, flimsy, mass-printed books with wood pulp paper, lurid covers, and fresh, gleaming ministry stamps. Gremory's tiny shop sells comestibles and several reliable vintages of chorister nectar. It's said he retrieves a tithe of it from the nearest hive. Devils have always got on with bees. Carillion's foyer. Grey stone, the colour of a monastery. Attending devils and devilisses dressed in uniform. An incoming parade of the sick, the friendless, the dying, and those who think their lives would be better if only they were something else. This is Carillion, where souls are refined into something more impressive. The presiding deviless. She is an artisan of souls. Perhaps she can do something with yours. Perhaps she'll just offer you advice. The presiding deviless works in an office shaped like a beehive, a stone and wickerwork building that stands all alone in the middle of Carillion's central courtyard. She conducts intake interviews with new patients one by one. After a long time in line, you reach her at last. Greetings, Captain. How may we stretch, strain, purify, and strengthen you, now you've come to Carillion? Her apron is starched, her dress pinstriped. There is a stack of patient files on her desk, color-coded. The corners of her mouth say she knows something to your disadvantage. We do whatever is necessary to reclaim unsatisfactory souls, she says. She sits back in her chair, and you can imagine her making just such a pitch to the princes of hell. For humans, primarily, though we do attend a few other creatures elsewhere in the Great Chain. They come to us with souls that are stained, disused, in every kind of sordid condition, and we make them acceptable again. Most of those who come to us are volunteers. The rest are beyond the position of being able to volunteer, consigned to Carillion by their families or employers. And after a stay at Carillion, what then? One should not enter if one does not know how to leave. She looks surprised. Most people go home again, she says. Some find that they are weary of their souls and pass them on to us. We operate on that slender profit, and on what we can get from donations, or from sales of penance and forgiveness. She looks at the blank page before her. But what about you? You look sturdy enough to make full use of our services. Are you afraid of needles? What's your view on worms? Which do you fear more, venoms or poisons? She takes down a page or two on all your least favorite things. She is prepared to offer you a deal. Listen, she says, you are free to make use of Carillion. Take a penance or two. Alter your soul. I think you'll find our services very imaginative. There's another matter I hope you will look into. A devil in rose-coloured gloves. He used to supervise the Gaslight Terrace. He was removed from that position, but I fear he may still not be entirely aligned with the objectives of Carillion. If you find out anything about him, anything to his disadvantage, she looks grim, bring me this evidence, and I will reward you. Come back if you have any other questions, says the Deviless. She has already opened the next file in her desk. You take some notes on a pilgrim's journey through Carillion. The first port of call is the beehive-shaped office in the centre, or more accurately, the long queue leading to it. From there, the infernal attendants direct them to one of Carillion's 7 gardens to undergo penances. They certainly look penitent by the time they emerge. Presumably their souls are much improved, not that you can tell. Carillion is broken into terraces where most of the soul treatments take place. Some are easier to access than others. The Gaslight Terrace. Dozens of newcomers walk in that direction. It must be a safe choice. Your companions are a lady in a buttoned cloak and a young male student. They talk amongst themselves about the seasonable warmth, and about how the yellowish glow of the lamps does not show blue silk to best effect. Their words are commonplace, their hands folded and gloved, their opinions supplied by a respectable gazette. You have almost forgotten them even while you are still walking together. The path extends by shallow steps to a broad terrace, as crowded as an imperial exhibition. Gaslight lampposts are scattered irregularly across a flagstone terrace. Between them are stations, each containing a patient receiving treatment. The supervising devils tend to these stations, stopping first here and then there, like bees at flowers. The spineless curate. He sits in stocks, attended on by a devilish orderly. His eyes beseech you to visit him. You step closer. I've seen something. In this light it's hard not to see things. A devilish orderly jabs at the curate with a needle. At the sight of the jab, the curate's skin goes lavender. I'm being treated for not believing in God. I've tried everything. Prayer, fasting, long weekends with a professional saint. None of it worked. My sermons were suffering. My bishop complained. And has it helped? I have dreams of snakes and angels, he says. It hasn't made me a mystic. I don't think the devils are real either. Just men with funny eyes, aren't they? The devilish orderly smiles, with extra teeth. No one else is climbing the staircase. The traffic is all towards the terrace. You brush past a matron in grey boots, a train conductor in his uniform, and a young boy who has already adopted the expression of fixed ennui. None of them notices you passing by. None shows any interest in your breaking this convention. The Bell Garden. The ascent is rocky. The sound of chimes is audible all the way down here. You put your foot on the first step, and a devil blocks you. Those who enter the garden must be in a proper state of hygiene, Captain, he says. Wouldn't want to make things worse for the poor sufferers. He washes his hands at the fountain. Stopping you must have been grubby work. The checkerboard garden. It is reached by a flight of wrong-sized steps, the risers too steep and the flats too narrow. By the time you come out onto the plane of the checkerboard, your calves are hurting. The devils are playing tricolour chess with some of the penitents. White pieces, red pieces, pieces the colour of a flourishing wind. Around the edges of the board sit patients who have already been captured, who were never part of the game to begin with. The rubbery man. He stands at the edge of the board, ignored by the players. No one has dressed him for the chess game, or let him enter the board. He stands off to one side, tentacles squirming. He's surprised that you approach him. He moves to make room for you in case you're merely trying to occupy his space. When you speak to him, he offers you a squishy handshake. By various signals, gestures, and directions of his eyes, he indicates that he has come here looking for his place in the world. The rubbery man holds up one tentacle, representing the devil with the rose-colored gloves. Then he holds up another tentacle. After a moment, he twists the two together. Are the tentacles meant to be kissing? Is that what this is? When you look blank, the rubbery man repeats the pantomime several times. Perhaps the devil has a lover? Perhaps the devil loves the rubbery man? Perhaps the devil enjoys exotic forms of dance? The White Queen is captured just as you go, but there's no time to look back at the match in progress. The Stunted Grove. At the center of Carillion, a half-height grove of blackthorn bushes. There's no real gate, but not much of a wall either. There's only a low stone barrier, perhaps a foot tall, easy to step over. The thorn bushes grow thorns an inch or more long. There are paths between them, but it's hard to pass by without tearing one's clothes. The devils who work here have scratches on their forearms, though they do not seem to mind. There's not a single comfortable place to sit. The professional penitent. She is seated on a stool, eating vast quantities of sorbet. It's a slow process, but the quality is better than the indulgence penance one may buy from the presiding deviless. The penitent is seated on a stool, eating from an enormous barrel of violet sorbet. There is enough to supply a carnival. The penitent's lips are blue, her fingers are sticky. There are purple smears on her frock. Wasps are taking an interest in the side of her face. When you come over, she puts down her spoon long enough to greet you. I'm here on behalf of a viscountess who doesn't love her children. She's waiting back in London for me to deliver her penance. Pointedly, the supervising devil sets another long-handled spoon at her elbow. Perhaps she knows something. She seems well acquainted with the place. She smiles reminiscently when you describe the devil in question. I know him, she says. I've been coming here a long time, in my line of work. He used to be very highly placed, you know, and then the presiding devil has caught him pinching supplies from the storehouse and gave him a demotion. Now he performs a few of the lesser punishments, some lightweight pitchforking, a little work with a hot poker, but his heart isn't in it. Devils don't stick long at anything. The punishments here are particularly physical in nature. A lady neither weeps nor feels regret. As punishment, she is bound, face down, to a huge block of ice. As for your punishment, it does not bear speaking of. You don't get through it. The wall is lower from this side. It's even easier to leave than to enter, because the ground is uneven. The terrace of glass statues. The path is a mirrored labyrinth. Entry is forbidden to those who are not already afflicted with a flickering soul. No one on the passage to the terrace will admit that they know where they're going. What a curious figure, says an old man, pointing at his own reflection. Here's hoping there aren't any other clowns of that nature where we're going, eh? He jabs you in the rib with his elbow. There are various figures who look familiar, but not a one of them is yourself. They're too tall, or too short, or too skinny, or too ill-dressed, or too foppish, or a bit too pleased with themselves. You've nothing in common with any of them. The terrace of glass statues. Stand in front of one of the statues and it will melt into your pose. It will look you in the eye. Its face will be your face, minus a few marks of character. It will still be transparent. The grim penitent seems oblivious to your presence. The man is slim and there are circles under his eyes. He shows no energy at all. He lifts his eyes when you seat yourself. It takes time to get him to speak. He finds the effort of conversation very hard going. For the first few exchanges he confines himself to the weather at Carillion. But finally he tells you why he's here. Too many years I lived on the other side of a mirror, he says. So long that I forgot everything but the place. So long that I forgot everything but that place and its ways, where is and is not change plate. Man, that's hard to read. Let's try that again. Too many years I lived on the other side of a mirror, he says. So long that I forgot everything but that place and its ways, where is and is not change places. I took a companion and endured his not love. It took me a long time to recognize it for what it was. He seems exhausted. There are a few others leaving Carillion at the same time. A lady walks beside you, looking rather depressed. This close to the mother of mountains, the sky grows cold. Your crew dons gloves and coats. Lights in the distance. A stoker begins to sing a ballad about the chimneys of New Winchester. The taste of smog, the sound of iron on iron. We're home. It is a comfortable room for a modest secretary. Stained glass windows lay crimson slants across the desk. The prudent secretary receives your reports and reads them one by one. A number of questions follow, to which the secretary expects cogent, succinct answers. Her Majesty is grateful, they say, as you leave. A scrubbed clerk begs a moment of your time. I represent Halliges, the banking house. I promise that this will only take a moment of your unquestionably valuable time. He produces a folded contract with a flourish. We hear promising things about you, Captain. Very promising indeed. We would like to extend our services. We provide a secure solution for the storage of your assets, absolute discretion, and steadfastness unto death and beyond. We require only a signature. The offer is entirely complimentary, I assure you. At Halliges, we measure ourselves by the quality of our clientele. There, it is done. I am certain that this represents the beginning of a long and warm relationship between ourselves and your lineage. May it endure. I bid you good day, Captain. A fortunate navigator is thoroughly examining your engine's paperwork. Crucial bit, this. Look how it's been maintained. Beautiful. Your stoker beams. That was me. A mid-flight patch, too. You won't regret this, Captain. The navigator pumps your hand. He is an Imperial, people descended from ancient Mongolians and led by the Eagle Khan, whose technology opened the door to the skies. A passing skyfarer tuzzles the navigator's hair. For luck, the woman says with a grin. The navigator rolls his eyes. She's from my last crew. They thought I brought them luck. I didn't, but I'm still a good hire. Okay, I think we're going to take a break. I need some tea. I've enjoyed this. I have no idea.